The sky was red with fire when the human soldier stumbled through the ruins. His armor was cracked, his shoulder burned from shrapnel, and blood had dried across his chest plate. Every step he took echoed with the sound of distant explosions. The city had been alive just hours ago, but now only smoke and ash marked the place where homes once stood. He had been trained for war, but not for this kind of silence. The silence after everything was already gone. His lungs burned as he forced himself to keep moving. Somewhere ahead he heard faint cries. Not the sound of soldiers or machines, but something softer, something alive. He pushed past broken walls and stepped over shattered steel until he saw movement among the rubble. His tired eyes widened when he saw a small figure trapped beneath the remains of a fallen roof. It was not human. The child had fur as white as snow, glowing faintly under the haze of firelight. Its large blue eyes blinked up at him and pointed. Ears twitched as it tried to move. The human soldier froze for a moment, unsure if he should reach out. His people had fought against these aliens for years. They were enemies, killers, the reason so many of his brothers had fallen. Yet the small cry of the child cut through all of that. Without thinking, he pushed away the debris and lifted the little body into his arms. The child clung to him instantly, its small hands clutching the strap of his armor. He felt the warmth of its body, trembling against his chest. It was fragile, terrified, and yet somehow alive when so much else around them was dead. His heart ached, and he wondered why war had no mercy for the innocent. He whispered softly to calm it, though he knew it didn't understand his language. But he was not alone. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, tall and fierce. She had long blue hair tied back, and her cat-like ears rose above her head. Her eyes were sharp as blades, and her armor shone with the dull glow of bear fur and steel plates. She was not like the child. She was strong, deadly, and very much aware of who he was. Her hand hovered near the weapon strapped to her side, and the air between them grew heavy with tension. The human soldier tightened his grip on the child, uncertain whether she would attack. He was wounded, and if she wanted him dead, it would not take her long. Yet she didn't strike. She only looked at him with a mix of rage and disbelief, her gaze locked on the child he now held. Her voice broke the silence. It was steady, commanding, but underneath it was something else. Something raw. She demanded that he return the child to her, her words sharp and filled with desperation. He could not understand all of it, but the meaning was clear. The child was hers. The soldier took a step back, his instincts screaming at him to run, but the child whimpered and buried its face against his chest. Something inside him refused to let go. He had carried wounded soldiers before, had seen comrades die in his arms, but never had he carried something so small, so helpless, so innocent. The alien woman's eyes burned as she watched him. Then, slowly, she lowered her weapon, though her body stayed tense. She spoke again, her tone softer but no less fierce. Through the smoke and ruin, he caught the meaning of her words. To save the child was to bind himself to her forever. A life debt, a bond that could not be broken. The soldier's breath caught in his throat. He had come to this battlefield expecting only death, but instead he stood at the edge of something he could not yet understand. The war raged around them, but in that moment, the only sound that mattered was the steady heartbeat of the child pressed against him, and the silent demand in the alien mother's eyes. The soldier's arms trembled as he held the child, but not from weakness. It was the weight of choice pressing on him. The alien mother's eyes never left him, glowing faintly in the smoky air. Her stance was proud, but her hands shook with the same desperation he felt. She had been ready to fight him, yet the sight of the child clinging to his armor forced her to stop. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Around them, the war roared. Distant blasts, the grind of machines, the shouts of soldiers who were still alive somewhere beyond the ruined streets. Yet here, in this small circle of silence, only 3 lives seemed to matter. The soldier's training screamed in his mind. Don't trust her. Don't trust any of them. He knew what his commanders would say. End it before she calls reinforcements. But then the child's hand reached up and touched his scarred cheek. The soft fur against his skin was enough to silence every order he had ever learned. The alien mother took a step closer. Her movements were slow, careful, as though she feared one sudden move would break the fragile truce between them. Her voice was low, carrying words he could not fully understand, but her tone was heavy with meaning. He caught fragments, something about blood, something about bond, something about forever. He looked into her eyes and saw not an enemy, but a mother on the edge of losing everything. The war had already stolen too much from both of them. He knew the look well. It was the same expression he had seen on the faces of human parents searching rubble for their children. The soldier shifted the child gently and spoke in his own language, his voice rough from smoke. "I won't hurt them. Not the child." She tilted her head, her ears twitching as if trying to read the rhythm of his words. Perhaps she did not understand, yet something in his tone seemed to reach her. Slowly she lowered her hand from her weapon. Then the ground shook. A distant explosion rattled through the ruins, followed by the heavy stomp of armored walkers moving closer. Both human and alien machines hunted these streets, and neither of them could stay here long. The soldier's instincts flared. He needed to move, to find cover before the next strike leveled the entire block. He glanced at the woman again. She was watching the horizon too, her eyes narrowing as the echoes of war drew nearer. When she looked back at him, there was no hesitation. She extended her hand, palm up, toward the child. His grip tightened. He wanted to give the child back, to end this strange encounter, but the small fingers clenched his armor tighter, refusing to let go. The soldier's chest ached at the trust so easily given to him, a stranger, an enemy. He shook his head. "They don't want me to let go," he said, though he knew she could not understand. For a moment, anger flashed in her eyes, but then it softened into something else. Recognition. She stepped closer, her voice quiet but sharp with promise. She pressed her fist against her chest and spoke in words heavy with vow. A life bond. He might not understand the language, but the weight of her gaze told him everything. If he carried the child, if he protected it, he would not walk away from this war unchanged. Their lives would be tied together, his fate bound to hers. The soldier swallowed hard, feeling the fire and smoke sting his lungs. He had not chosen this war, and now another choice was being forced upon him. Yet when he looked down at the child, its small eyes staring up at him with pure trust, he knew there was no turning back. The alien mother stepped beside him now, no longer a threat but a shadow at his side. The sounds of battle grew louder, the war drawing near again, and the three of them began to move together through the wreckage. Human and alien, bound not by treaty or command, but by something older, something stronger, a bond written in survival, in blood, and in the life of the child they both carried forward into the fire. The ruined city groaned around them as they moved, every broken wall ready to fall with the next blast. The human soldier limped, his wound pulling at him with every step, but he never loosened his hold on the child. The alien mother walked beside him, her eyes scanning every shadow, every corner. She carried no fear for herself, only for the small life they now both guarded. They didn't speak, not in words either of them could fully understand, but their movements began to mirror one another. When he ducked low, she followed. When she raised her hand to signal silence, he obeyed without question. Somehow, without language, they found rhythm. The soldier's mind raced. He had fought in this city for weeks, had seen men die for streets that no longer existed, and yet here he was walking beside an enemy. He could not make sense of it. His orders had always been clear. Aliens were threats, dangerous and merciless. But the child in his arms breathed softly against his chest, and the mother at his side had not killed him when she had the chance. He could feel the child's heartbeat, light, but steady. It was strange how such a small life could shift the weight of a war inside him. A sound broke the silence, metal grinding against stone. The soldier froze and pressed his back against a shattered wall, motioning with his head for the mother to stay still. She crouched low, her hand gripping the hilt of her blade, ears twitching as she listened. Through the smoke ahead, shapes emerged. Human soldiers, his own kind. Their armor was scorched but intact, their rifles raised as they swept through the ruins. The soldier's chest tightened. If they saw him with an alien child and mother, they would not hesitate. They would kill first, question later. The alien woman sensed it too. Her eyes sharpened and she shifted closer, her body tense like a predator ready to strike. He could almost feel her decision forming. If his people attacked, she would fight to the death. The soldier's grip on the child tightened. He couldn't let it happen. He leaned closer to her, lowering his voice to a whisper. "Don't move. Don't fight." She didn't understand the words, but she read his expression. Her jaw clenched, but she gave a single nod. The patrol passed, within meters of them. One soldier's flashlight beam swept across the rubble, nearly landing on their hiding place. The human soldier held his breath, pressing the child close against his chest. He could feel its small body trembling, tiny fingers clutching at his armor. The alien mother wrapped her arms around both of them, her body shielding them from view. The light lingered, then moved on. The sound of boots faded into the distance. Only when silence returned did the soldier breathe again. His body shook with the effort of staying still, but he kept his grip firm. Slowly, the alien woman pulled back, her sharp eyes studying him with something new. Not suspicion, not hatred, but a spark of understanding. He had just hidden them from his own people. For the first time since the war began, he wondered if he was still on the same side he had started on. They moved again, this time deeper into the ruins, away from both armies. The child stirred, making small noises, but soon drifted back into exhausted sleep. The soldier adjusted the weight gently, as though carrying the most fragile treasure in the world. The mother finally spoke, her voice quiet and steady. He did not know the words, but the way she touched her chest and then reached toward him told him what she meant. Gratitude, a promise, maybe even trust. The soldier gave a small nod. He did not speak her language, but he whispered anyway, as if the child could understand. "I'll keep you safe." As the night deepened, the three of them pressed on. Above them, the sky glowed with fire, and the ground shook with war. But here in the ruins, something new was forming. Not alliance, not peace. Something stranger. Something stronger. The night stretched long over the broken city. Fires burned in the distance, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, while smoke rolled like dark clouds across the ruined streets. The human soldier moved carefully, his steps uneven from the pain in his shoulder, but he refused to stop. The child slept against his chest, its small breath steady and warm. The alien mother walked close beside him, her sharp eyes never resting. They found shelter in the shell of an old building, its roof half collapsed, its walls scorched black from blasts. The soldier lowered himself against a stone pillar and finally allowed his body to rest. The child stirred but did not wake. He brushed soot from its fur, his hand shaking as exhaustion weighed on him. The alien woman entered last, her hand brushing across the walls, testing for danger. When she was satisfied, she knelt near him, her long blue hair falling forward as she studied his wound. He pulled back at first, wary, but her eyes told him there was no threat, only intent. She reached into a pouch at her side and pulled out herbs wrapped in cloth. He frowned. Human medics used bandages, injections, machines. This was different, primitive. Yet she tore the cloth, pressed the herbs into a paste, and carefully spread it over his shoulder. The sting made him grit his teeth, but the coolness that followed was almost soothing. The child stirred again and opened its bright eyes, watching both of them. The soldier met the gaze, and for the first time in many battles, he felt something beyond war. A sense of belonging. The child cooed softly and reached one small hand toward him, the other toward its mother. In that simple gesture, it tied them both together. He exhaled slowly. "You don't even know what's happening, do you?" He whispered to the child. You just want us here, together." The alien mother tilted her head, not understanding his words but sensing his tone. Her hand brushed the child's fur, and then she looked at him with something that seemed almost like acceptance. The soldier leaned back against the pillar, exhaustion pressing on him, but his mind refused to rest. If his own soldiers found them, again he would be executed for protecting an enemy. If her people found them, they might never forgive her for walking beside a human. The war had no room for bonds like this, yet the bond was already there. A distant sound broke his thoughts. Heavy engines grinding metal, the low growl of war machines sweeping the streets outside. The mother rose instantly, blade in hand. The soldier cursed under his breath and tightened his grip on the child. The machines were close, too close. Through a crack in the broken wall, he saw them. Towering alien walkers, their legs crushing stone as they marched. Blue lights pulsed along, their armored frames, weapons humming with deadly energy. These were not human machines. These were hers. The mother pressed her back against the wall, her jaw clenched. She whispered something fast and sharp, pointing at the machines, then at the soldier, then at the child. He understood without language. If the machines saw them, they would not care about her bond or his protection. They would destroy him on sight and perhaps her too for allowing him to carry the child. The soldier looked at her, his breathing heavy. "Then we hide," he muttered, though she could not hear his words. He shifted deeper into the shadows, pulling the child close to his chest. The mother crouched beside him, her hand gripping his arm for balance. Their bodies pressed together, in the narrow space, both silent, both waiting. The machines passed, their light sweeping dangerously close. At one point, a beam of blue light brushed across the ruined floor just inches from their feet. The soldier held his breath so tightly it felt like his chest would burst. The child whimpered, but the mother placed her hand gently over its mouth, her eyes never blinking as the machine's shadow loomed over them. And then, just as quickly as they came, the walkers moved on, their footsteps fading into the distance. Only then did the soldier breathe again, his lungs aching with relief. The mother lowered her hand, her shoulders shaking slightly as the tension left her. She turned to him, their faces close in the dim firelight. For the first time, he saw the exhaustion in her eyes, not of a warrior, but of a mother who had nearly lost everything. Without thinking, he nodded to her. A small gesture, but one that carried weight. She returned it, silent but sure. In that moment, he realized they were no longer enemies hiding in the same ruin. They were survivors, bound by a fragile thread neither of them had chosen but both of them now carried. The ruins grew quieter as dawn broke. Smoke thinned, letting pale light spill across the shattered city. The human soldier blinked against the gray morning, his muscles stiff and heavy from the long night. He shifted carefully, adjusting the child still resting against his chest. The small body was warm and its breathing steady, but his arms were weak from carrying it so long. The alien mother stirred beside him, her hand brushing hair from her tired eyes. She looked at him, then at the child, and though no words passed, between them, her expression spoke of relief. The three of them had survived the night, but survival was only the beginning. The soldier pushed himself up, pain searing through his wounded shoulder. He clenched his jaw, refusing to show weakness, but the mother noticed. She reached for him, pressing a hand against his chest as if telling him to rest. He shook his head. "No time," he muttered. He pointed toward the city's edge. Smoke rose thicker there, a sign of heavy fighting. She followed his gaze and gave a sharp nod. Her own people were out there, and so were his. If either side found them, the fragile trust between them could vanish in a heartbeat. The soldier adjusted his grip on the child and began moving through the rubble. The mother walked ahead, scanning the ground for traps and paths. She moved, like a hunter, every step precise, every ear twitching at the faintest sound. He followed her lead, his trust in her growing despite every voice in his head warning against it. As they moved, his thoughts drifted. Once he had carried only orders and weapons. Now he carried life itself. A child who had no part in this war. A child who looked at him not as enemy or soldier but simply as protector. The thought weighed on him more heavily than any armor he had ever worn. They reached what was once a wide avenue, now a graveyard of broken machines. Alien walkers lay shattered, their glowing cores dark. Human tanks burned, their steel twisted and torn. The ground was littered with helmets, banners, and silence. The soldier swallowed hard, his throat tight at the sight. This was no battlefield anymore. It was a warning. The mother paused, her eyes darting between wrecks. She crouched and picked up a shard of metal shaped like a blade, her fingers brushing it with recognition. Perhaps one of her own had fallen here. She whispered something in her language, a sound low and filled with grief. The soldier lowered his eyes. He had lost comrades too. He understood. Then a sound broke the silence. Footsteps. Not machines this time. Soldiers. Human voices carried through the smoke, rough and commanding. The soldier's heart lurched. He pressed his back against the wreck of a tank and pulled the child close. The mother crouched beside him, her blade ready, her eyes sharp with warning. The voices grew nearer. Through a gap he saw the outlines of 3 human soldiers moving cautiously, rifles ready. His throat tightened. These were his people. His side. Yet he knew what they would do if they saw the alien mother and child with him. The mother's muscles tensed. She was ready to strike, to spill blood if needed. He placed his free hand on her arm, shaking his head. He couldn't let more death fall here. The footsteps drew closer, then halted. One soldier's voice muttered, "No survivors here." Another kicked at debris. They moved on, unaware of the 3 lives hiding in their shadow. The soldier exhaled shakily, but his relief didn't last. He knew it was only a matter of time before someone did find them. They couldn't keep hiding in ruins. They needed a path out. As if hearing his thoughts, the mother touched her chest, then pointed beyond the ruins where the land dipped toward the mountains. Her eyes told him enough. Safety lay that way. He gave a slow nod. Together they moved again, stepping carefully over the battlefield graves. The child stirred and opened its eyes, gazing up at both of them with quiet trust. The soldier looked down and whispered, "We'll get you out of this." The mother's sharp ears caught the tone, if not the words. She looked at him then, her expression no longer enemy or stranger, but something closer to equal. And as they left the ruins behind, he realized something he had never thought possible. He was no longer fighting the war he had been sent to fight. He was fighting for them, for the bond forming in silence, for the fragile thread that could not be broken now. The mountains loomed closer with every step, their jagged peaks breaking through the haze of smoke like dark teeth. The soldier's legs burned, his breath ragged, but he refused to stop. The child was heavier now, or maybe he was simply weaker from blood loss. Still, he carried it tight against his chest. The alien mother walked ahead, silent, her senses alert to every sound. The road out of the city was dangerous. Fires burned in scattered pockets, and both human and alien patrols swept the ruins. More than once they were forced to drop into shadows, waiting as searchlights scanned across broken buildings. Each time, the soldier felt his heart pound, not for himself but for the child who stirred nervously in his arms. The mother was different now too. At first she had been fierce and ready to strike at him. Now she moved closer, as though protecting him as much as he was protecting her. When he stumbled, she steadied him with a hand against his back. When he bled through his bandages, she pressed her herbs into the wound again, her eyes fierce with determination. But the war was not blind. The armies were hunting. As they reached the edge of the ruins, a sharp whistle cut through the air. The soldier froze. The mother's ears twitched, and her hand went to her blade instantly. Then the ground shook with the impact of artillery shells landing close by. Dust rained down from shattered stone. The soldier threw himself over the child, shielding it as the air roared with fire. The mother crouched beside him, her body tense, her voice hissing words that were half command, half prayer. When the blasts ended, silence fell again, short, dangerous silence. Then came the voices. This time, not human, alien soldiers. The mother's eyes widened, her body going rigid. She whispered quickly, pointing toward the mountains again, urging him to move. But it was too late. Figures stepped out of the smoke. 3 alien warriors, their armor dark, their weapons glowing. They froze when they saw her. Then their eyes fell on him. A human soldier, with a child in his arms. The moment stretched, sharp and deadly. The alien warriors raised their weapons. The mother stepped forward, shouting words in her own tongue, her voice fierce, filled with authority. She gestured toward the child, then at the human soldier. The warriors hesitated, their expressions flickering between confusion and anger. One barked something back at her, shaking his head. Their weapons remained raised. The human soldiers, pulse thundered. He had faced death before, but this was different. He couldn't fight them, not with the child in his arms. He looked at the mother, his eyes pleading for something, anything. Then she did the unthinkable. She stepped between him and her own people, her arms spread wide, her voice rising into a command that echoed across the battlefield ruins. Her words were fast, sharp, final. The warriors faltered. One lowered his weapon slightly, but the others still held theirs steady. The soldier understood none of her language, but he saw the meaning clear in her stance. If they wanted to kill him, they would have to kill her too. The child whimpered, reaching toward its mother. The soldier shifted slightly, letting the child see her face. That small sound seemed to pierce the warriors' anger. Their weapons wavered. Finally, the lead warrior growled something and lowered his weapon fully. The others followed, though their eyes burned with distrust. The mother stepped closer to them, speaking in low, urgent tones. At last, the warriors gave curt nods and retreated into the smoke, leaving the 3 of them alive. The soldier exhaled shakily, his chest aching with relief. He looked at the mother, his voice rough. "You chose me over them." She did not understand the words, but she felt their weight. Her eyes met his, fierce and steady, and for the first time there was no distance between them, no enemy lines. Only a bond neither of them could deny. They moved on toward the mountains, their pace quickening. The soldier's body screamed with pain, but his resolve burned stronger. The mother walked close, her presence no longer a shadow of threat but a shield at his side. The child stirred again, its small voice breaking the silence with a soft sound that almost resembled laughter. For the first time since the war began, the soldier allowed himself a small smile. They were not safe yet, but for the first time he believed they might be. The path into the mountains was steep and narrow, littered with loose stone and broken roots that threatened to trip them at every step. The soldier's body screamed with pain, each breath sharp in his chest, but he refused to stop. The child clung to him, its small hands gripping his armor. The alien mother stayed close, her blade drawn, her sharp ears twitching at every sound. Behind them, the city still burned, the smoke rising like a dark wall against the sky. But the war was not far. The echoes of engines and gunfire carried into the mountains, and both of them knew their time was running short. The soldier staggered, his wound slowing him. The mother caught his arm, steadying him with surprising strength. For a moment they locked eyes, and though he had no words to explain it, she understood. He could not last much longer, yet neither of them even thought of leaving the child behind. They reached a ridge where the view opened wide. Below, deep in the valley, both armies were moving. Columns of soldiers, human tanks grinding forward, alien machines glowing with blue light. The war was shifting here toward the mountains. If they were caught in its path, there would be no escape. The soldier's throat tightened. "We're trapped," he whispered. The mother followed his gaze, her jaw set hard. She sheathed her blade and pulled a small horn-shaped device from her belt. She lifted it as though about to send a signal. His eyes widened. "No," he hissed, shaking his head. If she called her people, they would kill him instantly. He gripped the device, forcing it down. The child whimpered between them. For a tense moment, they stood locked in silent argument, both unwilling to give in. Then far below, the thunder of artillery shattered the valley. Fire rose into the air, lighting the ridge in a harsh red glow. They didn't have time to argue. The war was climbing toward them. The soldier shoved the device back into her belt and pointed higher into the mountains. Up, we go up. She hesitated, then gave a sharp nod. Together they climbed, the soldier gritting his teeth against pain, the mother steady and watchful at his side. Stones crumbled beneath their boots, but they pressed upward, higher and higher until the sounds of war below grew distant again. At last they reached a hollow carved into the mountain wall, a natural cave half hidden by rock. They slipped inside, the cool air wrapping around them like a shroud. The soldier lowered himself against the wall, his body trembling from exhaustion. He laid the child gently on his lap, brushing its fur as it slept. The mother crouched beside them, her breath heavy. For a long while neither spoke. The silence was broken only by the wind howling through the peaks. Then the soldier whispered, more to himself than her, "Why am I doing this?" His eyes burned as he looked down at the child. He had fought for medals, for orders, for survival, but never for this. Yet it felt truer than any cause he had known. The mother studied him, her expression softening. Slowly she pressed her hand against her chest, then placed it gently over his. The gesture was simple, but its meaning was clear. He was not alone in this bond. But the moment didn't last. The sound of boots echoed outside the cave. Human voices, close and clear. A search party. The soldier's heart hammered. He pulled the child close, rising to his feet despite the pain. The mother drew her blade, eyes sharp, her body ready. The voices grew louder, the light of flash lamps sweeping across the rocks outside. His people were here, and if they stepped inside, the fragile thread tying them together would snap in an instant. The soldier tightened his grip on the child and met the mother's gaze. Both of them knew the truth. This was the breaking point. The voices outside the cave grew clearer, harsh with command. Flashlights swept across the entrance, their glow cutting into the dark. The human soldier pressed his back against the stone, holding the child close. His pulse thundered. These were his people, soldiers who wore the same armor, carried the same rifles he once trusted. If they saw him here with an alien child and mother, they would not hesitate. The alien mother crouched beside him, her blade glinting faintly in the dim light. Her ears twitched at every sound. She was ready to fight, but her eyes met his, steady and sharp. She was asking him what he would choose. The child stirred, its small eyes opening to the world again. It blinked at the mother, then at the soldier, and let out a soft sound. Neither fear nor pain, only trust. That sound broke something inside him. He realized there was no choice at all. Not anymore. The footsteps drew closer. Shadows moved across the cave wall. The soldier's grip tightened on his rifle, but instead of raising it, he set it down on the ground. His free hand pressed against the child's back, steady and protective. He looked at the mother and gave a single nod. She understood. Her blade lowered, but she stepped closer, standing at his side. Their shoulders brushed, two enemies who had become something else entirely. The first human soldier stepped into the cave. His flashlight beam froze on them, on the child in the arms of a wounded man, on the alien mother standing guard. Shock flashed across his face. He raised his rifle instantly. "Enemy contact," he shouted. The soldier holding the child didn't move. "Wait!" His voice thundered, raw and desperate. "Don't shoot!" More soldiers flooded the entrance, rifles raised, their eyes wide with disbelief. Orders crackled through radios. Some shouted for him to step away. But he stood his ground, his arms locked around the child. The alien mother hissed, ready to strike. He reached out, pressing his hand against her arm. "No," he whispered. One of the soldiers stepped forward, his weapon trembling. "You're protecting them?" he demanded, his voice shaking. The wounded soldier drew himself up as tall as he could, his body weak but his voice unbroken. "I am." His words cut through the air. "This child is innocent. This woman is no threat. You kill them, you kill me too." Silence followed. The soldiers exchanged uneasy looks. None of them lowered their weapons, but none fired either. The child let out a small cry and reached toward the mother. She stepped closer, her presence fierce, her hand brushing over the soldier's wounded shoulder as if claiming him. She spoke in her own tongue, her words strong and unyielding. He didn't know the language, but he felt the weight of her vow. A life bond. She was binding him to her, to the child, in front of all who stood there. The humans muttered among themselves, their discipline fraying. Killing an alien was easy. Killing one of their own who had already risked his life for a child, that was harder. Finally, the ranking officer pushed his way forward, his eyes cold. He studied the scene for a long moment, then barked a single order. Stand down. The rifles lowered. Not willingly, not fully, but enough. The soldier's chest loosened with relief, though he knew the war outside would not end here. What had happened in this cave would follow him forever. He had crossed a line no soldier was meant to cross, but when he looked down at the child, safe in his arms, and at the mother standing tall beside him, he knew it was worth everything. Dawn broke across the mountains. The three of them stepped out of the cave. The war still raged below, but up here, a different story had been written. One of survival, of trust, of a bond sealed in fire and blood. The soldier had come to the battlefield expecting only death. Instead, he walked away carrying life, carrying a bond that no war could destroy.